All right, so today we're going to dive into the different ways we relate to God. We're drawing on some really insightful work from Skye Jethani to try and figure out why our spiritual lives can sometimes feel like, well, like a real struggle.
So let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like your spiritual life is just a treadmill? You're running and running, you're praying, you're serving, trying to do all the right things, but you're just not getting anywhere? It's a super common feeling, this kind of spiritual burnout. And that feeling? It often comes from adopting these postures toward God that were never really part of the original design. We get stuck in this cycle of just effort and frustration, and we're left wondering why our faith feels more like a chore than a real living relationship.
The big idea here is that from the very beginning, like back in Eden, humanity was created for communion, for just walking with God. But of course, sin came in and shattered that fellowship, and ever since, we've been trying to reconnect. But often we use these flawed methods, and we end up trading that true communion for, well, for lesser substitutes.
So let's look at 4 really common, but ultimately unfulfilling postures we tend to adopt. And as we go through them, just see if you recognize a default tendency in your own life. It can be pretty eye-opening. Okay, so the first common posture is what Jethani calls life under God. And you can kind of see it in the little diagram there. God is positioned up above and we're down below. This creates a relationship that's often defined by fear or just trying to appease him. The core assumption here is basically, hey, if I just follow all the divine rules, God will bless me and bad stuff won't happen. It turns the relationship into a transaction almost based on superstition. The heart here is performing out of a fear of punishment, not out of a genuine love for the Father. Now, the second posture flips this dynamic completely. It's life over God. And notice in the diagram how the person is now on top. This posture is all about control. In this view, God's wisdom isn't a person you relate to, but more like a system of principles you have to master. The Bible becomes something like a repair manual for life, and the goal is a predictable, manageable existence. But this whole mindset just resists the very surrender that's so essential for a real relationship. A third really common approach is life from God. And in this view, God becomes a kind of cosmic vending machine, a dispenser of blessings. The assumption is that God's main job is to supply what we want: health, success, comfort, peace. And this one can be really subtle. We might even be thankful for the gifts. But if we're honest, we find that we desire the gifts way more than the giver himself. Okay, the fourth misstep is one that so many devoted, service-oriented people fall into. It's called life for God. Here, our value and our identity get all wrapped up in what we do for God. The mission itself can subtly become an idol, replacing God himself. And this relentless striving for significance, it's a fast track to burnout and feeling like we're only as good as our last achievement for the kingdom. So, if those are the postures that lead to exhaustion, what's the alternative? What is the posture our hearts were actually designed for in the first place? Well, the intended design is a life of communion. This posture moves way beyond rules, principles, gifts, or tasks. It's all about intentional, mutual presence. It's simply dwelling with God in the relationship that Christ came to restore. Jesus gives us the absolute perfect picture of this in the Gospel of John. He gives this one invitation: abide in me. That word, abide, it just means to remain, to stay, to dwell. It's a call to rest in connection, not to work in isolation. And this just illustrates the point so brilliantly. I mean, think about it. A branch doesn't perform rituals to get sap. It doesn't master principles for growing grapes. It simply exists in constant union with the vine. And from that union, it naturally receives everything it needs to live and to bear fruit. And that brings us to the ideal posture: life with God. In this relationship, the goal is not to use God to get something else, whether that's security or success or comfort or significance. The goal is simply God himself. His presence becomes the very center of our desire. So how do we get there? If we've been living under or over, from or for God, how in the world do we recover this life with God? Well, the good news is, it's not about trying harder. See, God's solution to our broken fellowship wasn't to send a stricter list of rules or a better set of principles or a bigger mission. His solution was personal. He came himself in Jesus to be Emmanuel, which literally means God with us. He came to restore that walk in the garden. So the crucial point is this: life with God is not something we achieve through our own effort.
It is something we receive. The gospel declares that because of what Jesus has done, the relationship is already restored. Our job is just to live in light of that amazing reality.
This all leads to a great invitation, a chance to reorient our whole focus away from performance and toward presence. So, what's the core takeaway here? It's that every other posture we've talked about, under, over, from, and for, ultimately keeps God at a distance. It makes him a means to an end. But life with God is radically different. It's not about doing more, it's about being with him more. The goal isn't to strive and climb our way up to God. It's to receive the God who came down to be with us. So as we finish up, here is something to really reflect on. Which of these postures do you most often find yourself falling into? And what might change in your life, your work, your relationships, your faith, if your primary goal shifted from getting something from God to simply enjoying his presence with you?